I'm a city mouse. My husband and I both believe that roughing it is staying at a Hampton Inn. I fell into it when I was working at Discovery Channel and started working on Shark Week shows. And I was approached by the executive team at Discovery Channel that one of the executives needed help with a project. And they needed to bring in she was the executive producer. I was a senior producer, and that they needed someone else to work on it. And I said, okay. They're like, it's nature. And I said, oh, I don't like predation. I don't like seeing animals die. This is really difficult for me. Don't make me do it. And they're like, well, okay, we hear you, but I don't think you understand. You're doing it. And I said, okay, and that project was Planet Earth. And so as soon as I worked on Planet Earth with the amazing Maureen Lemire and the team out of BBC Natural History Unit, I kind of got tagged with it. And that launched my career into doing nature programs and wildlife.
Hello. Welcome to another episode of Adeptus On-Air. I am again your host, Mike Hoffman, and today I'm joined by two-time Emmy Award-winning documentary filmmaker, Shannon Malone-deBenedictis. Shannon, how you doing today?
I'm good. How you doing? Great to be here.
I appreciate you coming on from rainy Washington, D.C. today.
Yeah, it's bleak. Yeah, it's bleak and bleak. Yeah.
I get it. We're in rainy New Jersey, so it's same rain a few hundred miles away.
Yeah.
But quite an impressive storytelling list. Just to read a few to the listeners. You've been on Disney Plus, Netflix, National Geographic, WB Discovery. Some of the credits: Saving Yellowstone with Dennis Quaid, Brown and Bonded, Secret of the Whales on Disney Plus, which was executive produced by James Cameron, narrated by Sigourney Weaver, Penguin Town on Netflix, and those were the two that earned the Emmy Award for Excellence in Documentary and Nature Storytelling. Pretty impressive list.
Thank you. Been a long time, working a long time in this industry. Yep.
So, seems like it's very nature, environment driven. Was that always a passion of yours as a kid, the nature and the environment, or is that just a way that your career just somehow evolved?
Oh no, it evolved. I'm a city mouse. My husband and I both believe that roughing it is staying at a Hampton Inn. So this is something. No, what I fell into it when I was working at Discovery Channel and started working on Shark Week shows, and I was approached by the executive team at Discovery Channel that one of the executives needed help with a project, and they needed to bring in she was the executive producer. I was a senior producer, and that they needed someone else to work on it. And I said, okay. They're like, it's nature. And I said, oh, I don't like predation. I don't like seeing animals die. This is really difficult for me. Don't make me do it. And they're like, well, okay, we hear you, but I don't think you understand. You're doing it. And I said, okay, and that project was Planet Earth. And so as soon as I worked on Planet Earth with the amazing Maureen Lemire and the team out of BBC Natural History Unit, I kind of got tagged with it. And it was a great move, because what I find is I'm always looking for the story. I'm always looking of what is the thing that's going to appeal to the general audience. I like to joke that when I look and try to tell stories, one element I find is to try to find that 14-year-old inside of yourself, because 14-year-olds can grasp higher concepts, but they still are in awe of things that are really cool, or things that are like a giant squid and things. And so what are those things that are going to pull in an audience that's going to make them engage and want to care? And that launched my career into doing nature programs and wildlife.
Well, it's funny because, full disclosure, if I'm flipping the channels, I'm generally not stopping on National Geographic. It's not, or a History Channel even. I'm more of I want to relax and kind of be entertained instead of educated. Awful approach, don't tell my kids that. But I will say that when you watch these kind of documentaries, if you sit and watch it, I do find myself getting into them very quickly, because kind of to your point about you're in awe of what you see. These are things that you don't experience in your everyday life, whether it's about, penguins, or whether it's about the environment and something. And you are kind of floored, because you think about the world, there are so many amazing things that you just don't know about. So when you see them and learn about them, you are kind of floored.
Absolutely. We're tasked with bringing almost an alien world to your sofa, into your living room. And doing that, it's identifying the things that separate us as being humans and higher intelligence, but also are things that are similar. And, with Secrets of the Whales, what we showed was that many scientists now believe that whales have culture, and culture is something very akin to humanity, very akin to friendships, relationships, teamwork, all those different types of things. And for a long time, science wouldn't use the word culture. They wouldn't use that. They would say that's too, you're putting too many human emotions and too many human elements onto wildlife or to these animals. But you look at it, you can't say, look, this mother is mourning her cub. It's obvious it's mourning. Why are you denying what we're actually seeing? And as well as with animals who share 94%, 92 to 94%, don't come after me, everybody, of the same nervous system as us. These are some things. So I think that's our goal. Our goal is to bring that in and to tell a story really, really well that makes you feel like you've been transported someplace different.
Because when you think about things, and we'll stick to the animals for a second, and this is just how my warp mind kind of goes sometimes, is, you talk about the emotions, and you do animals have emotions, and you'll see it, when you see one of these documentaries and a baby, whether it's a calf or whatever's born, and then you see the mom kind of go up, snuggle for a second, but then kind of walk away. Mm-hmm. That's probably normal, and maybe they're seeking shelter or whatever it may be. But then I always say to myself, okay, but if a mom, has 7 puppies, a day later or a month later or a week later, those puppies are all separated from their moms to go to homes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so when you're dealing with the emotional aspect of it, well, that's not instinctual to a baby gorilla who's going to live with the mom in the jungle.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also, I worked on a series called Saving Yellowstone with Dennis Quaid, and we got into the ins and outs of the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, which is shockingly big. It's not just the park. It's all through the region. And one thing you learn about that is different animals and different species have evolved their child rearing, using the word child, in different ways that work best, evolutionary ways to survive. So when you say, like, you see a calf, a cow calf or a deer calf or something, and they go and they show some affection, then they move on. It's because those animals have to be ambulatory very soon. I joke that bison and pronghorn, that they're up and ready to go within hours, within a day, where the canid family, wolves, dogs, foxes, coyotes, they're a much more nurturing. They end up spending months, almost, they're not ready to leave the den for 5-6 months. So because of that, it's an evolutionary thing. And so that is, but in the past, we would look at that and say, well, they're not caring mothers. And it's like, no, this is the way that they've done to teach their offspring how to survive. That, you can't have a pronghorn fawn laying there for months on end, because it's easy prey. So that's the things that kind of, when I discover it, that's the 14-year-old side person inside of me who goes, wow, that is really, really cool. That is fascinating, and so my goal is, how do I shape that into a story that I'm going to make sure people don't leave, that they sit there and they watch the entire thing?
Well, I think that's the key, especially now in the era of the phone and clips and reels and TikToks, that if you're not captivated into something in about 10 minutes, it's so easy to move on. Think about 20 years ago, when you wanted to watch a movie, you had to either go to theater or you had the DVD mailed to you from Netflix. And if you hated it, you were still watching it because you didn't have an alternative.
Yeah.
Now, between cable, all these streaming services, I mean, I'll just give an example. It was Saturday and we put on a movie on Netflix. Mm-hmm. And 10 minutes in, my wife said, this is awful.
Yeah.
So what
it
do we
could
do?
have just been awful. Yeah.
It could have been awful, but we stopped watching it.
Yeah.
Is my point. That first 10 minutes didn't suck her in enough to say, all right, I'm going to, kill the next hour and a half watching this. I'd rather kill the next hour and a half, we'll do whatever else. In this case, it was, watching the same Law and Order SVU episode for the 73rd time. But she chose that over that movie because it didn't grab you. Mm-hmm. So is now social media and people's attention spans and so forth, does it change how you kind of jump into a story, because now you got to kind of get to it pretty quickly to keep an audience?
Yes, but no if I write articles regularly on LinkedIn and my blog, and I wrote an article about this
Mhm.
and about that there is this belief that our attention spans are shrinking. However, I have Instagram. I don't have TikTok because that's too many apps. It's just,
Yeah.
at this point. But
Oh,
I
so you
watch
don't see me dancing around then? That's a shame.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Yeah, but I watch Instagram and I watch, video loops of
Yeah.
kittens being cute and people sliding on ice, and I laugh hysterically, and I joke to my husband, say I can't compete with that, right?
Right.
Like I know I'm not even going to try to compete with that, right? But at the same time, there have been studies that have shown, coming out of universities and science institutions, that our brain needs both. Our
Mhm.
brain likes that instant stimulation, that instant thing, but it also likes elements where you have to kind of slowly absorb, be drawn in, and slowly you get involved in it. Slowly you do that. And you look at some of the TV series that are out there. um Severance is certainly, it's a brilliant series,
Mhm.
but it didn't get to the point very quickly.
Right.
It didn't grab you immediately. You had to make an investment. Andor is another example. I think Andor is one of the best series to be made in the past 2 decades. And it took some time to get
Right.
to really, you had to make a commitment. And I think that for the people who crave that, who crave that type of experience, I think it can be really, really rewarding. And I mean, if someone can sit through a 2 hour, 45-minute superhero film, and I'm not dissing superhero films,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
just a former editor and think everything can be shorter. That's the
Yeah.
thing for
Yeah. Yeah.
me, is that I think it's just it taps into a different emotional need,
Yeah.
a different desire of what you want to experience.
So I'm going to change gears based upon your last comment.
Yeah.
I think it's a great point. So when you're doing a documentary, whatever that is, when does too much become too much? So because I'm sure when you have all your footage and all of your information and all your stories, and I'm sure all the people you interviewed and things like that, you can make it, I'm sure, into 8 to 10 hours. You have
Mhm.
enough material, but you're not going to air 8 to 10 hours. You're going to kind of make it either an hour and a half, 2 hours. So what's the key in your mind? When is enough enough?
The key is, and your interview with Julian Hampton kind of talked about this, is that I'm always first and foremost telling a story. I am whether the story is a migration, whether it is research that's being done, is I'm building a story, and in doing that, I am always cognizant that there is a beginning, there is a middle, and there is
Mhm.
an end. And if I just strung out footage of animal and the wildlife, that's just a screensaver. That's all
Yeah.
that is. There's not a story there. So how do I build the story that's going to be provocative, is going to be keep people's interest? How do I balance it out that there are no lulls, or if the lull is there, it's building up to something new? And
Mhm.
the analogy I like to use, and it's part of a class that I teach about, from idea to pitch, about how to build your narrative structure, is to think about kind of traditional roller coasters. Traditional roller coasters, they don't just, for the most part, you have some that just spin around, 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 around.
Mhm.
But for the most part, you have this build up, and then you have this first hook, like this first incredible drop, and then you kind of go crazy, and then it builds up to what's going to be the next kind of
Mhm.
big thing, and then you have your big finale, your big drop, your big spin, or whatever. And in structuring a story, it's very similar. It's, how am I going to get people involved and invested quickly? How am I going to lay this out? How am I going to continue to build up to what's going to be my big finale in the show, or my big reveal, that kind of encapsulates everything I'm trying to say? And then I end it with a coda of, okay, this is amazing. This is incredible. And so it's the same thing when you're building a really true natural history show. You see it in Secrets of the Whales. You see it in the NBC Peacock series America.
Mhm.
These are all things that you're building that narrative structure to make sure that the audience is coming away with an experience as well as knowledge.
Well, it's funny when you said the roller coaster and you're describing that. The first thing I thought of in a comparison was a fireworks show.
Hmm. Yeah, that's another good one. Yeah, when you see, they're not just randomly throwing things
Right.
up and saying like that. There's a plan. There's a
It's also
strategy
a
behind.
little lull right before that big finale. You don't see You see a few little duds.
Yeah.
before they explode to you with the 45 seconds of just nonstop attack. Yeah.
Yeah. Any drama,
Mhm.
anything that you see, and as said, I think Julian mentioned it in your interview with him,
Yeah.
is before they're going to go in and bust out the brother, they're going to do that. They're laying out the plans, but they're slowly turning
Yeah.
the temperature up. They're
Yeah.
slowly doing that, so you come up to that, and when you're putting together a documentary, the ending may be a reveal. It may be something new. It may be a build up to, like, will they survive the migratory path? Will they survive? The show that just aired, the big buildup was that the trees that they're trying to protect are all dying, and it's
Right.
like you're like, how are they going to survive? And the reveal at the end is like that there's a huge commitment by people to
Right.
restore these
Yeah.
trees.
So you just took away my next question, Dan.
Oh, sorry.
Because what I was going to say is when you said every story is a beginning, middle, and end, your stories really don't have an end
Hmm.
because you're talking about Yellowstone. Yellowstone's still there. You're talking about penguins. You're talking about
Yeah.
something in nature. So your ending isn't the end of the story. It's basically what's about to happen next.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, in a good way, it's almost like a teaser because there is no definitive end to it unless it was, okay, this forest is now a shopping mall.
Hmm.
Short of that, yours doesn't have a definitive ending, which I think is kind of cool because you're leaving it, you're telling the story, you're educating on where we are now, but you're also leaving these questions or what needs to happen in the future to preserve the species, to keep the land, whatever it may be. So I think it's kind of it gives you, I think, more to play with at the end.
It does. It does. And one part of building that structure when you're doing it, a phrase that you hear a lot, phrase I use, is you also very early on in the very beginning, you define your North Star. What are you telling? What is the story you're telling? Because, like you said, it can go so many different ways. It can be like, it's, this is a geological thing. This is great. Everybody's done this. But what is your North Star? What are you
Yeah.
going to do? So for like whales, it was, this is culture. They have culture. We came back to that every single time. For Penguin Town, it was, we looked at the season. So the season, when they're in town, when they're in Simonstown, of what a penguin goes through from the moment they come for the beginning of the season to when they go back into the ocean, our North Star was telling that
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
So that always lends to what your concluding coda is going to be, is come back to what that North Star is. What is that mission that you're trying to accomplish? And that helps you narrow down how you're going to wrap it up.
Yeah. So now that you have that thing after your name, that Emmy Award winning, and now
Yeah.
you have those two pretty things that are sitting right behind you, which took me
Yeah.
about 10 minutes into this to notice. But now that I see them, I keep looking at them. They're pretty cool. I imagine now you have more opportunities and you could be a little more, not that you ever weren't, but a little more selective into future projects. What attracts you to your next project? Like, what are you looking for? Because I'm going to guess, not being a nature person like me, it's like you're not necessarily saying, "Oh, I want to do something on this." I imagine a lot of times it's people kind of coming to you because of what you can add to what they want to tell. But what do you look for in a project?
Well, thank you for the compliment. I would love to say that yes, I can be, now that I've won 2 Emmys, I can be super selective and whatnot. But I don't think anybody is like that in the business, unless, I mean, I just watched over the weekend. You talked about watching things. I watched the 5-part documentary series about Martin Scorsese, and it took him a very long time to get to where he could just do his own projects.
Yeah,
He,
yeah.
he mentions that. So, but
But your
what
name's out there more. Let's put it out there.
Oh yeah, no, my name is
You're
out
more
there.
known now than you might have been
Yeah,
15, 20 years ago, where
yeah.
you're like, oh my God, someone won, that kind of thing is
Yeah,
my
I
point.
think what's been really helpful with it is that it does open more doors. It does do things of saying, "Hey," it also lends credibility of that I've been recognized by my colleagues and that I'm someone that you can invest money in or invest time or anything, and that I will deliver a project. So that's a really, really nice thing to have. That doesn't mean it's uh I think Julian mentioned it. One thing, when you finish a project, your brain has already moved on. It's like,
Yeah,
what is the next thing that you're working on? And
yeah,
you kind of are already jumping ahead. But I've also gotten to a point in my career where I realized that, I was getting older. I'm not saying that TV is always a young person's game, but there's a lot of hustle that's involved. There's a lot of a lot of competing, and I got to a point where I'm like, I don't know if I want to compete some more. So what I've done is I've diversified. Is I still produce. I have a set of series on right now. I'm working on an independent film that I'm doing crowdsource funding for, but I'm also running classes. I'm consulting. I'm doing different things that keep my kind of creative energies alive, and that's been really really helpful.
So part of what you do in your roles on some of these projects is, it's also a management. So it's not just the creativity of putting together the story
Hmm.
and telling the story, but it's managing whether it's writers, your creative team, I'm sure budgets and things like that. So how is it balancing all of that?
When you've been in the industry for a while, you get really good at looking at things from 10,000 feet. And
Mhm.
that is something that I am very good at. I'm very good at coming in and saying, looking at everything and going, I think you ought to do this. I think you ought to do this. I think you ought to do this. And that comes from just years
Right.
of experience, years of exposure. I seriously have seen thousands upon thousands of hours of television programming. So
Yeah.
this comes from just a lot of in depth. And I think bringing that in is, I offer to clients, I offer to people maybe a perspective that they haven't seen, because it's always easier to look at something else and go, hey, I think you should do that, where it's much more difficult to do it self-reflectively for many people.
Mm-hmm.
And helping filmmakers do that, helping creatives do that, helping businesses do that, or, et cetera, it's something that I'm absolutely happy to do. And so, like the indie film Brown and Bonded, the director reached out to me. He said, "Look, we're struggling with this. I need someone to come in as an executive producer to kind of help us, just straighten the ship." And it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
even that. It's his film. It's his baby. It is his vision. My task was to work with him to help him achieve his best
His vision.
vision.
Yeah.
That was it. It was not about me. It was about him. And in the end, the film's now been accepted, I think, to like 15 different film festivals and
Fantastic.
whatnot. So that is kind of the role that I play. It's still him front and center. It's his baby. And I can't stress that enough. It's when it's someone else's baby, you need to let them kind of not, be like, oh, this is mine. This is
Yeah.
it. Like, no, you help them achieve their vision and sit back and be really happy that you were able to help.
Well, like anything else, egos play a role in life.
Always.
It's just, whether it's an entertainment business, it doesn't matter. Some
Yeah.
people have big egos, some people don't.
Yeah.
And I think it's also managing those different kinds of personalities
Hmm.
and knowing and you having a good understanding. Okay, this is what I'm tasked to do here. I'm tasked to help him with his vision. This isn't about me.
Hmm.
This is this.
Most most of my management strategy is, I believe that most people know what to do. I think sometimes what undermines them is they're just not certain. They're not 100% certain if that's the right thing they should do. And a lot of times they just need the boost.
Sure.
So I used to joke with people who work for me, and they would come in and they'd say, I have a problem, blah, 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 blah. And I would say, okay, so what do you think you ought to do?
Mhm.
And they would tell me, and I'm like, that sounds like a good solution. Let's do it. And I'd say 75-80% of the time it was right.
Yeah.
And I would joke later on after I left, or I saw him years later, I'm like, I really wasn't listening. I knew you knew the answer. I just,
Yeah.
you
You
just
just need
needed,
someone to say, go for it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that being a good manager is, I like the phrase stewardship. I like the idea of that you're working to support everybody, and you let them kind of explore and succeed, but you don't leave them dangle. You don't throw them under the bus. You don't, like, you give, I hate using the phrase long leash.
Yeah.
It's, I'm going to let you succeed, and I always have your back.
Yeah.
And that is the best way to grow and learn.
Yeah. What I kind of say to some of my staff, and we've evolved after COVID. We're an accounting firm, and we have people that work home now, and we have a lot more remote people than we had before COVID. And they talk about hours and when I need to work and how do you know I'm working. And my answer is always this: it's kind of like guilt, innocent until proven guilty. I trust you
Hmm.
until you give me reason not to trust you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's kind of what you just said. I have confidence in you, and I'm going to give you that long leash until I see that giving you that long leash is turning into an absolute disaster.
No, that's exactly it. I had one person who I actually, I did a podcast interview, and he said, your employees, do you make, they work 40-hour week? And I said, no, I don't care.
Yeah.
Do your job.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if it takes you 24 hours to do your job, there's going to be times it's probably going to be more than that. But I'm hiring you to do a job and hit a deadline. If you need to go to the gym in the middle of the day, go to the gym in the middle of the day. I don't care. Just get the job done. And I'm not going to babysit you. Like you said, don't give me, I trust you until you give me reason not to trust you. And then we're going to check in and see what's going on.
Yeah, 100%. So you mentioned a few things that are going on, right now.
Yeah.
Before we get to that, a question I ask all of my, creatives, especially in the TV and movie world. Are you able to turn off your profession if you're just at home with your husband watching TV? And are you able to enjoy what you're watching without analyzing aspects of it as it's your career? Meaning, can you just enjoy programming without saying, oh my God, I would have done it this way, or no build up, or when is this ending, or this is way too long, they could have condensed it?
Did you talk to my husband?
Okay, I think you just told me the answer to that. Okay, yeah.
No, I'm not. And in fact, it's in particular, I am not able to watch most nonfiction programming, because I'm analyzing it, because my brain is not just checking it of like catching mistakes. And part of that is also being a former editor. Is when you're an editor, you're kind of conditioned to look for every single little mistake. But is that it's a really difficult time, which is why the majority of the stuff that I watch is the complete opposite of the work that I do.
Yeah.
So I do watch, I watch the Scorsese documentary, I watch the Stiller and Mirror documentary, I do watch feature docs, but I'm a really big fan of like Bob's Burgers, and I watch a lot, like Archer, I watch a lot of cartoons, adult cartoons. I watch a lot of silly things, and it's because, one, I love it, I think it's a riot and a hoot, but two, I can't analyze it.
Right.
My brain shuts off. I can't analyze it. So it's so much fun for me because it's difficult. My husband, it's the poor guy. He'll see me and I'll be doing something and he will hear me wince at a music transition and he'll hit pause and go, okay, what is it now? Yeah. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, honey. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's hard.
Yeah. I can see that. I can see why it's a problem, and send him my condolences, because the poor guy just works all day and wants to just watch TV, and
Yeah. I feel it was when we got together. It was funny. He's like, "Oh, do you watch?" He mentioned some History Channel show, and I said, "I can't, honey. I can't watch it."
If it's a deal breaker, it's a deal breaker.
It's fine. Yeah. It's fine. It's totally fine. He doesn't really like long form docs, so it's totally fine. So it's like we have our split things. We have plenty of TVs in the house. We're good. Yeah.
So knowing that you're in DC, are those national bobbleheads I see behind you?
Yeah, I'm a diehard baseball fan. No, it's funny you brought up sports earlier. No, I love baseball. I grew up playing sports, and back before ADHD was diagnosed, and really, my parents decided to put me in every sport imaginable. So I grew up playing like every sport.
Yeah.
And then when I became an adult, when I moved to Chicago and lived 3 blocks away from Wrigley Field, I became a diehard baseball fan. And since the Nationals, just when they got their team, I became a season ticket holder, and I've been a season ticket holder from the very beginning. So,
nice.
Yeah,
I was a season ticket holder for years for the Mets, but where I live, it's so hard to get to. It's an hour and a half each way, and then with traffic, it's like now instead of doing that, I'll just kind of go when I want to go.
Yeah. It's been. I try to explain to people it's more than just a passion for baseball and whatnot. It is also the camaraderie of the group in our section. We are like that movie Fever Pitch. We've had funerals, we've had weddings, we've had all of it, and we take pictures every year together because it's also the camaraderie with the people there.
So that's a perfect movie that you can watch and not analyze, because obviously it's a little far-fetched, but great movie.
Yeah, no, it's a great movie. And my husband's like, I'm Drew Barrymore. He's like, you. I'm like, yeah, you are Drew Barrymore in this. But what brought us together is his first pickup line to me. We got married 8 years ago, been together 10 years. But his pickup line to me was, I'm a Phillies fan. Will that rule me out? And I said, well, we'll see. And so he's from Philadelphia. He's Philly team. I'm from DC. But
Yeah.
when they play each other, we just sit in our neutral corners and don't
Well,
cheer.
yeah, my daughter's going on 5 years with someone. I'm guessing they'll be engaged soon. And Philly,
Yeah.
same thing. And we're Giants, Mets, Rangers, and I got to deal with Sixers, Phillies, Eagles, and yeah, yeah, it's not
Yeah, no,
fun.
I mean the good news is, and you can cut this out if you want, is that when Snyder took over the Washington team,
Mhm.
his behavior was so bad, and I mean again, I'm born and raised in DC, so his behavior was so bad that about 5 years ago I walked away from
Yeah,
the football team, and so that made it easier. And I went and embraced Detroit, and they turned around. I'm not saying I had something to do with it, but I did embrace Detroit at that point.
yeah,
But that made it easier for me to say, yeah, go ahead and fly the Eagles flag in front of my
yeah.
house. Now I'm fine with the Commanders. I'm happy that they're on the right track.
Under ownership always helps.
Yeah, always, always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are you working on now? What's next for you over the next few months, years?
Yeah, so Saving Yellowstone has been airing on Warner Brothers Discovery and Animal Planet. You'll be able to find that on
Mhm.
different platforms. It's a really fascinating insight into the Yellowstone ecosystem and the whole area. And what I really am proud of with that series is it's a local production. We worked in local nonprofits, local scientists, local experts, and just people there about not just about the wildlife, but about life in
Yeah.
that region, and from a really 360 perspective. I have an indie doc that I'm crowdfunding for on Seed and Spark called
Mhm.
Farmville, Fire and Tar Paper Shack, which is about the 1951 student walkout in Farmville, Virginia, led by Barbara Johns, which was a case part of Brown versus Board of Education,
Mhm.
and the aftermath of that. And I do consulting, and I teach classes on Udemy about script development, on idea development, and also kind of personal development, because right now the TV industry and entertainment industry is struggling
Yeah.
badly. And so before I was in television, I was a talent agent for advertising and computer professionals. And I said, you know what, I want to help my friends. And so I've put together a course, and I give lectures on how to sell yourself like a TV show. And
Well,
like I talked about, looking at yourself from a different perspective.
Well, it's
How do
funny
you,
you say that because I found a quote of yours which I love.
yeah.
I'm like, how am I going to get this into the conversation?
Okay.
And you just gave me perfect segues. Let's talk about it before we wrap this up.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I think that I said it yesterday when I was recording on the podcast. Sometimes like one statement just sounds like it's a throw off statement, but when you really look at it and think about it,
Hmm.
it just makes a ton of sense.
Hmm.
And the quote is, "Life is what you make of it. If it doesn't fit, make alterations."
Yeah, that's the incredible Linda Hunt for the movie Silverado.
Yeah,
And I think that that's the case. I think that we're so ingrained. It's ingrained in us that we have our career, and this is your career, and this is it, and you do this for the rest of your life. And when you think of yourself in that silo of this is, well, I'm a blank,
Mhm.
it limits your experience of where you
Yeah,
can broaden out. And with television, you know, I see so many incredibly talented people, more people than jobs that are open, and looking at themselves and say, like, look, you know, make alterations, look at your job, look at what you're good at, look at how you can shape yourself into other industries and other places that you will be an absolute rock star. I have a dear friend of mine who transitioned into corporate media, and she laughs because she goes into it and people are panicking, and she's like, this is
this
nothing
is
compared
nothing.
to
Yeah,
TV.
yeah.
Nothing. And she's like, yeah, I'm going home every day and at 5. And I'm like, what? That's crazy. What do you mean? And she's like, it's fine. It's totally fine. So thank you for recognizing that quote. I've loved that quote. It stuck with me since Silverado
Yeah.
it was released back in the 80s. And I just think it's a really good approach towards life, of looking at yourself at what you're really good at and what you're really talented at, and you exceed, as well as potentially even have fun doing, and letting that drive, as opposed to sticking a label on yourself and saying, I'm a producer, or I'm this, or I'm that.
Yeah. So you mentioned the TV shows that you like. So this will be the last question. From a movie perspective,
Yeah.
not in terms of what you've enjoyed, give me 2 or 3 movies over the past 15 or 10, 15, 20 years you think are the best movies created. And best could be defined in any way that you want to define best. Just give me 2 or 3 that you think stand out as these are just a cut above everything else.
I think Moonlight is one of the best films that's been made. I was just absolutely blown away with how amazing that film was, and the story it told, the technically everything. I was so moved by it, and just think it was something that everybody should watch. Every filmmaker should watch. I was so, yeah, it that. The other one might be surprising is Encanto. And I say Encanto because Encanto is got great music, great
Mm-hmm.
characters, all that. But here is a Disney film that talks about the generational trauma of being a refugee and the weight that is carried on by family members generations after generation of dealing with that trauma and the expectations to overcome that.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about the depth of what they're talking about
Yeah, that's
really
pretty deep.
in Encanto, it makes it such a complex and beautiful film and an incredible lesson for everybody of understanding what our parents, our grandparents, what our legacy and what we carry with ourselves. So those would be the two that jump out at me.
Well, there you go. Perfect way to end it.
Yeah, there we go.
I will say this back to documentaries, and I probably shouldn't bring this up now because this could be a 20-minute discussion. When I hear movies that are based on something,
Mhm.
I've just become so skeptical because then when you hear later on that whatever it's based on, how these key scenes were just made up,
Yeah.
it kind of to me takes away. So obviously what you're doing does not apply to this. So I'm not minimizing what you're doing, but I think there's so many examples and like some, Rudy.
Hmm.
Great movie, very entertaining, and the big scene where all the players go into the guy's office and say, "Give him my jersey, let him play." Never happened.
Yeah.
I know you think of The Blind Side. It's like, no, the stories happen. Captain Phillips. Well, so these things are based on things, and I would once love to see an actual, almost like a documentary, but not a documentary. Meaning, I would have loved to have seen. How do I say this? I would love to have seen Rudy as an entertainment movie,
Hmm.
but with not made up scenes. I
Yeah.
mean, obviously it can't be 100% accurate, but to create a whole fictitious 3-minute scene that never happened, to me, is love the movie. But now I look back, I'm like, well, now the story about Rudy isn't as amazing as the movie made it out to be. To me, it kind of downplayed what actually really happened because you felt the need to fabricate these things to make it a better story.
Yeah, it frustrates me too when I watch that, and I think that it's sometimes stories are always inspired by real life events,
Yeah.
I mean, even sci-fi, is a different way of telling real parables, real stories
Are
and
you saying aliens are not real?
whatnot.
But
These days, who
you,
knows?
you never know.
Who
Exactly.
knows at this point at this
Yeah.
point? But I think what really is when I think it verges into I don't know if malpractice is the right word. It just really angers me is when facts are omitted at the expense of somebody or something else.
Mhm.
And the one movie that I get really on my high horse about is Boys Don't Cry,
Okay. Yeah.
about that one
Yeah.
because in the final scene, when he is murdered, in the movie, in the dramatization, there was a black man there, and they completely eliminated that character in the movie. They eliminated the death of somebody,
Right. Right.
their existence in the
Yeah.
dramatization. And
Yeah.
to me, that is that is wrong. You need to acknowledge that someone else
Right.
died. You need
Yeah.
to acknowledge that. I think sometimes Hollywood gets wrapped up and dramatizations get wrapped up in these great stories and feel like no, but we have to have it a happy ending. Like I heard in the Scorsese documentary that when he did New York, New York,
Hmm?
it's an unhappy ending. And George Lucas came to him and said, if you had had a happy ending, you would have made $10 million more. And Scorsese said, yeah, but that's not real.
Right.
That's not true. And I think sometimes that pressure to make sure that you're making something that's going to bring you in $10 million more, that's going to do that,
Yeah.
overcomes and changes what the reality is. I'm not saying that everything needs to be real. I think The Blind Side is a really sad case because I think there were elements of that movie that were really good,
Hmm.
and that I think that showing people what poverty is
Hmm.
like when he says it's the first time he's ever
As on bed.
dead.
Yeah.
I think that scene slapped so many people across the face. And then that emotional pull was completely undermined by the what the family had done, what came out in the truth. So there's a way to do it and just make it fictionalized and do it so you're not completely ripping off somebody's story. Just tell a different story.
Right.
Just do that.
I'll be clear. It does say based on. So I get it. And I know I'm not watching a documentary. So if I'm watching one of your things, I know there's not going to be any dramatization. You're telling facts. That's what it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But in this,
Yeah.
I don't care that you're embellishing, but adding events that never happened or removing someone from a murder scene or whatever, to me, it's no longer it's based on it. But now let's add the word loosely, because now it's really loosely based on it, and
I hope that comes from this, though, is that we're just coming off an era of an incredible run of great documentaries and a lot of money going into documentaries. Yeah. It's ebbing now, but we just come off a great run. If you get frustrated by it, go back and watch the original documentary, because usually, like, The Staircase is a really good example. The original Staircase documentary is fantastic.
Yep, correct.
Watch that documentary. Watch the Murdaugh documentary as well as the new Murdaugh series. It's good to watch, go back and find the documentary.
When you have a comparison.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I say. Yeah.
So how can people find you? I know your company is Padlin Creative. So that's
PADLIN Creative. Feel free to reach out to me. You can book appointments. You can book just chats. I offer free chats just to talk to people. I'm also on social media, on Instagram, not TikTok. Again, too many apps. Instagram, LinkedIn as well. Everybody can find me there. Yep.
Awesome. Well, listen, really enjoyed this. Wish you nothing but continued success. When I saw I was doing this, I told my wife we're gonna check some of these out over the next few weeks.
Great.
Well, thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Adeptus On-Air. If you like this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. The views and opinions by the podcast speakers and guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Adeptus. This podcast provides general information only and is not intended to constitute advice.